what Aiken is doing with horses and because of horses than something like this. So yeah, thank you all so much for coming. As we get started, I put together a list of topics, and as I'm getting closer to the event, I'm like, it's like when you show up for a wedding and you're supposed to give the best man speech, and then you just throw the papers out and you speak from the heart. I'm going to try not to do that, but I can't promise anything. However, what I wanted to bring to the table was we all, in horses, out of horses, in life, deal with failure. We have to work on our mindset. This is one of the things that I think horses really teach us is, one, you can never prepare the right way because you have plan A through Z and they somehow put numerous letters of the alphabet together and you have to figure it out kind of on the fly. And two, when things don't go the way you want, we've all been in situations where we had expectations and things either fell apart or didn't go as planned. And how do we deal with that? How do we overcome that? So what better guest than, two people that are pushing the limits of what they do. And so we're going to get this evening started by kind of talking about mental preparation and what goes into, for Helena, there are times where I'm sure she has incredible guests on and it's so intimidating to feel like, okay, how do I bring the best out of this guest? And for Emily, she's competed at the toughest events in the world, which, I'm really excited to dig into. So if you guys wouldn't mind, jumping in, when you have something that is big, how do you prepare for that?
I'm going to let you take this one, girl. 5-star doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, I guess I will start. So for me, having a routine that I do on a daily basis, whether I'm at home or I'm at an event, is really helpful because it's just a grounding thing that I can always come back to, and it's a way I start my day every day, so then it makes the big competitions not feel so scary, perhaps. So for me, that's yoga in the morning, doing that, and some meditation, and just kind of taking a moment to be with my thoughts, I guess, and have a plan for the rest of the day. Again, whatever that day might be. But it's helpful for me to do that no matter what situation I'm in.
And how long have you stuck to that routine, and how did you get to a place where, okay, I find the best results with this thing?
So I've always been interested in yoga, and then when I started riding for Philip Dutton, I don't know how many years ago now, but a long time ago, I was riding a ton, and it was just getting kind of hard on my body. I'm like, I need something else, some sort of cross training. And yoga with the stretching of the muscles, where like riding kind of compresses everything and it can be hard on your body. So that was a really good outlet for me, especially when I was working in kind of a high pressure environment. Going to a yoga class was, again, like a very grounding experience. And then I got hooked, and yoga is kind of like a gateway drug to other things in the wellness industry. So like meditation, and I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but yeah, just the basic yoga and meditation has been what has stuck with me.
I went down that rabbit hole with you because I forgot the question. I want to just piggyback off of something you said in the beginning, which was having routine and infrastructure. So very much like horses, for me personally, and I think everybody's different, so it takes a minute of self-reflection. What do you need to be comfortable in any given task? And for me, It's having an infrastructure, having a routine, so that my day, when I get up in the morning from soaking mash to closing that last gate at night, everything has to be in sequence. It's almost like a choreography, because there's so many unpredictable things. Like we're horse people, so we spend 90% of our time in reactive mode. We're reacting to our horse's needs, we're reacting to our client's needs, we're reacting to something that's unpredictable. So if you can create the most predictability you can through routine and systems and all that, I find that I'm better able to deal with the things, the unexpected. And that's usually what stresses me out. Like, fear of the unknown. It's anticipatory anxiety. What's going to happen? What's going to go wrong? What if? So I know if I have a foundation of routine and structure, then I feel more confident and better prepared to deal with what I don't know is coming.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the things that I think about all the time is there's a podcast that I listened to a while ago, and they have this superstition question. And it made me think of, do routines almost become superstitious, where if I don't do that routine, I wake up late, my alarm doesn't go off, I don't have that extra 15, 20, 30 minutes in the morning, is that day, do you feel like it affects you in a negative way?
I've had those days where I'm like, oh gosh, I can't do my routine, but I try to maybe do a condensed version, or also things have gone okay even if I don't do my routine. But I do, yeah, it can be a bit of a superstition. Like that's a good point, because yeah, you don't want that not being able to do something have that affect your mental game, because you're so worried that you broke your normal routine.
Yeah, and it's, I feel like riders especially, we get into these, okay, I have to put my left boot on first. I had a really good dressage test in this saddle pad, so this is the only saddle pad I'm going to use from here on in. And I have a lucky pair of socks, and I don't know why we're so prone to this superstitious, personality trait, but it always, because I'm a morning routine more so in the sense of I get up, I have my cup of coffee, I take time for myself, and sometimes, the dog is sick, or, and I'm like, oh my God, kill me now. And it's 5:30 in the morning, and it's like, no, this is just, I just have to move on. And so I think it's really important that we have these routines that we can fall back on, but at the same time, if we can't perform those routines, it doesn't necessarily affect us in a negative light, if that makes any sense. But speaking of which, one of the big things I wanted to talk about, and that I've been really interested, is how people view failure, and what is your definition of failure? Is it something you even think about? Is it something at the end of the day you're like, Jesus, I failed that? Or is it, I didn't perform, I can learn from it and move on? What is your relationship like with failure?
I think true failure is only when you don't learn from your mistakes. Like, to me, I don't really feel like I've ever failed at anything. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I've learned from them, so that turns that into a positive.
Yeah, that's, I used to think I didn't complete that event, I failed. And then it's like, no, you only fail if you quit. It's never, I think people view success and failure as this final state where if I do this, I'll be successful, and if I don't do this, I've failed. Where it's time and place. It's, okay, yeah, I may have failed at that thing, I fell off or whatever, but I've also been successful at that thing. And so it's a fluctuating state. What are your views, Helena, on?
I don't really have a relationship with failure. The word is weird to me because I don't know what it means. I wouldn't know how to define it. I have also made a lot of mistakes. But I would ask the question, like, what do you think is failure? What does the world, how does the world define failure? If you're kind to yourself, you'll say, I didn't reach that goal, or I could have done things differently. So, how do you have, I guess failure is the absence of having compassion for yourself. And maybe, I'm going to reach a little bit here, maybe, again, my whole world is about self-reflection because we do so many things without thinking about them. If we stop for a second and say, why did I not reach my goal? Or why did I make that mistake? Or why does this not feel right? That to blame someone else or something else rather than saying, oh, how did I track that? What could I have done differently? And to get a little bit of wisdom out of that. If you don't have that conversation with yourself at all, I guess that's probably the closest thing to failure that I might define. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So then let me ask you, do you think of success? Like, do you have a relationship with success?
Success is easy because it feels good. So when you feel good or you see your horse feel good, it's this common, it's whatever the positive emotions are. It's joy, it's accomplishment, it's excitement, all of those positive adjectives could be success. It could be, 9 o'clock in the morning, I have success because I woke up and it's, the weather's beautiful and I feel good. Or I passed a test and I feel accomplished. So I think there's a lot more flexibility. It's a little bit broader.
Yeah, that's kind of what I feel like too. There's, when you ride, especially if you ride more than one horse a day, even if you ride two, you can have the best ride on one horse and then your next horse just gives you the middle finger. And you're like, God, I felt so good about this ride, but then this ride happened and now I feel so bad. But you almost have to separate the two of them. Like, it's just, you were successful, and then goes back to what you were saying, yes, I learned something. And if I didn't, I better figure it out because I don't want to ride like that again. So, but
it doesn't mean you don't feel bad.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that you go through the whole day or days like, oh, I'm just happy and everything's great. I mean, there have been times that I'm like, what the fuck? Why did I do that? Or I feel down on myself. So you still experience the heaviness of your mistakes or bad decisions or whatever you want to call them. So, but how that connects to the word failure, I don't know. But I can tell you that there have been plenty of times where I've felt really, really bad about some decisions I've made, particularly in the saddle. So I just wanted to sneak that in there because it does. How many times have you guys cried because of your horse? Yeah. I mean, ask my husband. I have 2 thoroughbreds at home. I'm like a DIYer during COVID, and I cried every third day. Every third day, I was like, my horse is awesome. And then the next day, I was like, forget it. I'm overfaced. She's got to go.
I mean, that's just how it is,
And so for you especially, like, because you've competed overseas, when you go from having, maybe you have a great dressage test and then you have
That rarely happens.
I've seen Barry do dressage. He has fun. But, okay, so you've had a great cross-country ride.
Yes, that's more like it.
And then, maybe you go into stadium and they're just maybe a little tired and they don't give you the ride that you so badly wanted. How do you leave the event?
I think you have to go into it with a kind of what your expectations and like a goal. You could have you're just like, if I reach this goal, I'll be happy. And then you could have your stretch goal, like, I'd love to win this event, So I think I always try to go in with like a realistic goal. And then I do have my other goal kind of on the side. But, and if that happens, that's great. So, when I was competing in Europe, doing badminton in Burley, it was like just to finish. That was my goal. I wanted to finish. Like, obviously, I wanted to do well, but just to finish was a huge accomplishment. And for me, that was success. Like, other people might have been like, oh, well, you weren't in the top 10 and whatever. But I was in the top 20 at Burley, and that felt pretty great. So,
And when you're setting goals, what does the process look like for you to be like, okay, this is what I aim to accomplish this week?
I think mostly I just am really honest about where I'm at in my training and with my horse. When I first got to the 5-star level, again, it was just like, let's get this done. And now with each 5-star, I'm a little bit more greedy. Hopefully in a good way. Yeah. But you just like, you get to a point you're like, okay, well, I don't really just want to finish another 5-star. Like, I'd like to higher up. So, but again, you have to see where your horse is, like physically, mentally, and then kind of adjust your goal based on that.
And do you always go into competition with a goal in mind?
Yes.
And for every horse at every level?
Yep, I definitely do that.
And how does that vary?
Again, I think it just depends on where the horse is in their training. Like, we were talking before this started about, I have 2 young horses at the moment. They're both the same age. They're both imported from Holland. They're like very talented, lovely horses. But the mare she's like a go-getter. She knows her job, loves her job, wants to do her job, and has excelled very quickly, versus the gelding. He likes his job, but he's just a goofball. And so, like, my expectations for the 2 horses are just very different. So, like, with Newman, it's, let's just have a nice, calm, positive ride around the course and just see where that puts us. And with Lady, I'm definitely more competitive. So I think you just have to take each horse on a case-by-case basis.
And Helena, what about with business, with the podcast? Do you set goals for those individual things, or do you kind of just take it as it comes? Or
It's funny that you ask that, because no, I don't. And I probably should. And I tell all my clients that you should.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Well, for me, the podcast is more of an art form. So for me, podcasting is the art of conversation, and some of you who know me have heard me say this before. So it's a little bit more of a labor of love. You need to be disciplined because it's work, especially if you have sponsors and it's paying some of your bills. It's deadline based. So yeah, maybe I'm going to change my answer and say, yes, I do have goals. And typically the goal is, let's get this show out on the deadline, the day it's supposed to. I very often miss that goal. But that's because I have horses, 3 horses, 1 me. So, the podcast side, interestingly, it started out just as a standalone. That was the kind of the core of my business, and the business model was more like media and advertising than what it is. But through the podcast, having done it for 15 years, you eventually start to get these emails in, and oh, can I pick your brain about this? Or you talked about that on the podcast, and before you know it, you're like, you know what, I really should be charging you for my time. And so things evolve. So on the revenue side, on the business side, I do have hard goals. And this is something that I think every horse professional should go through, and that is to sit down with a spreadsheet and some numbers and do financial projections. How many lessons do I need to teach? How many horses do I have to ride? This is how much money I want to make at the end of the year or every month. How much would it cost me to hire a barn manager? That's a really big one. So and this is kind of like setting your intention. What are your goals? This is what I want to achieve. This is what I want my life to look like. And these are the things I need to have in place in order to get there. And on the business side, it's usually, how much do I need to charge? And how many of each thing do I need to deliver every month in order to make that a reality?
I just want to kind of tail off something you said, that your business evolved because of the podcast. Do you think if you had had a goal for your podcast, you wouldn't have evolved in the way you have?
No, but that's because of my very specific brain type. So I have attention deficit, hyperactivity, ADHD. I'm hyperactive. But I wasn't diagnosed until I was 50. I found out that my daughter had it, and of course learned that it runs in families. So I was on the hamster wheel for a very long time, working very hard and not getting anywhere. I would set goals and they would disappear. But it wasn't until I had some more insight about how I worked, how my brain worked, what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were. Then I could start to shift the kind of work that I did. So it played into my strengths and not so much my weaknesses. And that is also something that plagues a lot of horse professionals. They are artists, they are trainers, not so much business people. So how do you leverage their strengths and kind of downplay the weaknesses? So
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like as horse people, as competitors, we can get very goal oriented and very tunnel visioned into this. This is the one thing I want to accomplish, and I'm going to make this happen at all costs. And we can be very good at that, but then I feel like it almost blocks us from other things that could potentially happen if we weren't so, not necessarily goal oriented, but tunnel visioned in this one direction.
it's it's like having soft eyes. You have to be able to hyper focus on something. You got to be able to look up right in the middle of that top rail, right? And then you have to be able to soften your eyes. Then you got to focus in on that top rail. So, but that's a really hard thing to do because a lot of us we're chasing something. It could be a ribbon. It could be a sense of satisfaction. It could be staying alive. So it's easy to get stuck in that hyper focus mode. Yeah. And sometimes it helps to have someone on the ground say, whoa, back up, take a look, you go take a dressage lesson.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that like I've struggled with in my own journey with horses is being so ambitious, and the horses do not like that energy. They're like, lady, if I could just hang out in my paddock all day, my life would be way better than you kicking, spurring me, and telling me I need to go in a straight line. And it really makes you think, am I the problem?
Am I the drama?
I might be the drama.
I'm always the drama. I'm always the drama.
And, I get so fascinated by people who, as I do my own podcast, the Equestrian Entrepreneur, I always go back to asking people, what are your goals? What do you find that is success? The people that are successful are like, yeah, I knew I wanted it, but I just kept working hard. And it wasn't so much about hitting that goal, but it was about just continually pushing towards the goal that brought me there. And And then it makes me think about, well, why do some people hit goals and why do some people not hit goals? And one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was fear and anxiety, the fear of the unknown, the anxiety of, I can't, literally the whole reason I wanted Emily here was, how do you deal with the nerves in the start box at Burley? And so, yeah. How do you deal with the nerves and?
Yeah, I have a great partner in Barry, so that's how I deal with that. He I know he's gonna jump the things, and we have such a good relationship at this point that there's a lot of trust. And I am more nervous going into the dressage ring than I am to jump around Burley, and that is the truth. So, but yeah, so
And how do you feel? What do you feel before you go down the center line? Do you feel the anxiety, or are you just trying to be like, I'm talking both of us off a ledge here, just go in and survive?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, at first it was kind of like, let's just keep it in the ring. That was my goal. And we have improved a lot. Hopefully you guys will see that this weekend if you go to the Grand Prix eventing. But yeah, we put in a lot of work. But I think just for me, at some point you just have to let go. You're like, I've done all I can do. I've trained. I've gone through the test. Like, I'm going to do my best. I don't know what he's going to do, but I'm just going to, give it my all. And then I try to remember to breathe. So
Breathing is important. It's funny. Side note, I worked with a sports psychologist last year, and he was like, because I get really bad anxiety before dressage as well. We event for the cross country. If any of you talk to any eventing person ever, no one does it for the dressage. And I had a horse, and she was really tough. And I was just like, God, my coach tells me I'm nervous, but I don't feel nervous. And I start working with the sports psychologist, and I was warming up at, the first event of the season. And I was just sitting there, literally feeding my horse cookies next to the dressage ring. And I go, oh, my heart's pounding. I think this is nervousness. And I was so excited to feel it, because I was like, now I can do something about it. Where before I literally did not feel it. I was so not connected to whatever internally was happening that other people could see it and they could bring it up to me. And I was like, I don't think I'm nervous for dressage. Like, I don't like dressage enough to be nervous about it. And nope, turns out the dressage nerves are real. And so how do you deal with, you have these off the track thoroughbreds and you're a DIYer. How do you deal with the, maybe it's not fear, maybe it's not even anxiety, but
it's fear and anxiety. It's fear and anxiety. The slicing everything up into very tiny tasks, 1%. So I will consume, I have for a very long time consumed every bit of course information that's ever been published. And it goes into this little supercomputer that, if I could explain to you, so my brain, remember pinball machines? Okay, that's how my brain works. So, and it can get overwhelming. With a thoroughbred, I've got this Chonkadonk Appy. He's like an old-time Appy. He's got big feet and a big butt, and he was my field hunter for a long time, and he's great. You can put anybody on him, and he'll just pack you around. But his favorite things to do are eat and stand still. So when I went to go look for my next horse, I said, I just want something that's a little more in front of my leg. And I ended up with 2 thoroughbred mares, one unraced, one who raced. But I said, okay, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to get professional help. So being willing to ask for help, saying, I can't do this by myself. I know I'm a little overfaced, but maybe together we can get this done. Unfortunately, COVID hit, and I was left to my own devices. So it really was a matter of survival. I've got this, at the time, it was just one thoroughbred. And I did a podcast episode about it, a thoroughbred in my backyard. And it was the most downloaded podcast I've done in 15 years. People were very interested in how do you make that work. I'm interested in how to make that work. So, one of my favorite trainers is Tick Maynard, and he's an inventor, and he's also an equine behaviorist, so we have that in common. And he would say, don't be afraid to dial it all the way down to your comfort level, all the way down. And I'm like, okay, so I turned the dial down, and I still wasn't comfortable. And I'm like, I should be doing better. I should be, everybody's telling me this horse should be, jumping courses after 3 months or doing this. And I'm like, why is this not happening? And then I just kept hearing his voice in my head, just keep dialing it down. Just keep dialing. If you think you're going to go out there and you have planned to do A, B, and C, and you get out there and you're just looking at A, you're like, this is not going to happen. Well, then do A and a half. So I started making up these increments, these units of measure that made me comfortable, because I very quickly realized that the more comfortable I am, the more confident my horse is, and the better student she was. So I was able to teach her. So I became the trainer, but not until my horse was comfortable enough to be a good student. And so I got that little taste, and I'm like, I want more. So let's do another puzzle. Give me another challenge. But always keeping in mind that it was okay to dial it back down to my comfort level.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially with thoroughbreds who are so, sometimes they almost get hyperactive because they want to please us so bad, and then we go into it like, I'm just not doing anything right, and they're like, what are we not doing right? I'm trying so hard for you. And it's like, I don't even know what to do right now. And I kind of had a similar thing. I had this really talented horse, and for the first 2 years I had her, it was like, God, if some other more successful rider had this horse, they would be doing everything right now. And here I am, literally for 2 years trying to survive at the training level. And sometimes we survived and sometimes we did not. And it just kept coming back to this internal, well, she's made for a better rider. And then for me personally, I was just like, I can just become a better rider. And that's when my mentality of, anxiety or not being enough kind of changed, because I was like, oh, I can just practice and I can just get better. And, she may get pissed off at me because I'm not, I bought her from a really talented rider and I was not that really talented rider. But it taught me so much about what you were talking about. You have to really break things down. And if it's not for the horse, it's for yourself. And it's okay to do it for yourself because they feel that too. And it's so important as we go through this journey with each of these individual horses that we realize, okay, this horse will jump a small condo from a standstill. Maybe they don't like the dressage. Maybe they don't like the stadium, but they love this thing. And how do I make these other things more fun for all parties involved? Because let me tell you, I've left the dressage ring crying way more times than I have ever left the cross-country course or a stadium course. And my first pony, I got excused from the dressage. My first event, I got excused from the dressage ring because in my canter circle, my pony took off and jumped out of the ring. And I didn't realize that got you eliminated, so I jumped back in and continued my test. And it cursed me from the beginning. I was like, God, if only in eventing you did cross country first, I think we would all be much more successful.
I agree.
Yeah. And, and then, so it, failure and anxiety, I think it just comes from, what's that quote? It's like, comparison is the theft of joy. And especially with social media today, we are so easily able to compare ourselves. I mean, there are kids 10 years younger than me doing 3 levels above what I'm doing. And it's like, okay, I just need to let that go. We're all on our own journey. Our horses are all on their own journey. And, social media also doesn't show the whole side of it. And so that kid could have fallen off 2 days ago, and then yes, they went and had a good event, but they're not showing you that they fell off. And it's so important to remember we all fail, and we all have anxiety, and we all have fear, and it's just learning that we all have it, and it's okay. And that kind of leads us to kind of what I wanted to close this interview with, was a hard truth, whether that hard truth is in riding, in life, in podcasting. And, for me, I think the hard truth is we all are on our own journey. And it is hard. It's hard to watch the kid 10 years younger than you doing what you want to do. And it's also hard to watch your friend get the owner, get the sponsor that you wanted, and you didn't get it, and you don't know why. But we're all on our own journey. And what is a truth that you've learned?
So kind of feeding off of what you were saying, is usually the timeline that you have set in your head to accomplish this thing, like it rarely happens. And I think, it probably will happen eventually, but you don't know what the universe has planned for you. And so I think just remembering, like, if you really want something, to stick with it, persevere, it'll happen eventually. Maybe not in the way that you thought or in the time that you thought, but I do believe that if it's meant to happen, it will. So,
And what about you, Helena?
Well, I don't think your truths were hard. Like, I'm gonna, so like a little small soapbox. I think the hard truth that I've come to realize is that most people who work with horses do not understand horses. They understand components of them, but there's a huge chunk of the way the animal behaves, the way behavior is shaped, what their needs are. I bet if you asked, no offense to everybody here, but I bet if I polled you about what the 5 freedoms are, you'd be hard pressed to tell me what the 5 freedoms are. And you can't really have a healthy, well-adjusted pleasure horse, competitive horse, any kind of working horse, unless you meet their needs. And we think we're meeting their needs, but we often project human needs on top of the animal that we call horse. And that leads to a lot of well-meaning but misplaced training methods, expectations. And so I think that sometimes we're fighting ourselves. We're fighting our own delusion. The good news is that science and technology, and yes, the internet, we're able to look inside our horses' minds and bodies today in ways that we could never do that before. And we then take this information, and because we've got the internet and social media, we can spread it. I'm not going to go into misinformation at this point. That's a whole nother night. But so we're learning more about our equine partners, and we can meet their needs. You said, Emily, that you have a good relationship with Barry. I would love to sit down and ask you about what you did to build that relationship. You asked about failure. I just thought of a time when I failed my horse, when I betrayed her trust. So I think that's the hard truth, is we think we know, and then we go about our days like we know. So a little bit, and you hit the ground once or twice, you get that humility. You're like, I need to learn something. I don't know what I thought I knew, right? I hit the ground plenty of times. So, which meant that I just then dove into, why did this happen? Why did, and back to my 2 thoroughbreds. I've got one who is like your mare. Give me a job, give me something to do, put me together. I want to feel your hand. I feel better, right? The other one's like, she's one who actually raced one. Total goofball, has no proprioception, doesn't know where her feet are, will do whatever you ask her to do. They look exactly the same. They're 15-3 hand bay thoroughbreds with white and white on their face and 3 socks. Right, Buck? You can barely tell them apart. Like, completely dispositioned. So you don't just bring home a thoroughbred and say, I'm gonna put everything I know about training thoroughbreds to work. You really have to acknowledge the individual animal before you can set any kind of goal or expectation. I will get off my soapbox now.
No, I think that's a really important point, and I think it all kind of circles back to when we were talking about goals, and Emily brought up a great point of every horse is different, so every goal we set for that horse is different. And I have some horses that I have 1 or 2 days dedicated to playing, and we go in the field, we're in a rope halter, it's fun, there's no stress. And then I have some horses that are like, I want nothing to do with you on the ground, and that's fine, and we do not play. We work, and I try to make the work fun, but they all like their own thing. And we talk about anthropomorphism with horses a lot, because we, for a long time, I agree, we didn't know how their brains work. We knew they were prey animals and we're predators, and we're trying to create this relationship with a horse that's ultimately afraid of us deep in their core. And
They're afraid of everything.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
a bag on the ground especially. And so it's figuring out who they are and what they want, and then you can say, okay, this is what I want. I can work with you, and maybe you're not gonna go to the 5-star, maybe you're not gonna go to prelim, but maybe you'd be happy doing a beginner novice with an adult amateur for the rest of your life. And then you have some where you're like, I am never letting an adult amateur sit on you as long as I have insurance. Like, no way. And so it really is figuring out who they are and figuring out who you are, and then using both of those things to train. So that concludes our first Voices in Aiken. I did want to open the floor up to if anyone had any questions, comments.
You want to cry?
Do we want more wine?
Which then leads to crying. Usually.
Well, you guys are talking about goals, and I wrote at the race time, and I jumpers now, and I think the question of setting real at the bar high, and the word failure will come in the process. So, as you said, with the dialing it down, I'll tell you what they want.
It's hard to dial it down though, because there's this sense of, like, for me, it's like I should be here. I should be there.
Realistic.
Yeah, but you gotta swim upstream sometimes to do that. Trust your intuition.
Well, and that's where I feel like social media almost hurts us in what we do, because we do so often, well, I want to be here. And maybe I'm not that far away, but like getting from here to here can look like this. And so then you're here and you're like, oh my God, I'm so far away. But literally a week later, you're here and you're like, oh, I guess I did do that thing. And that's kind of where I get like, well, do goals limit us in some way? Because you are only thinking about this one thing versus taking the win when you can receive it. I think I saw.
So I surprised when I get on a horse. Something well, like yesterday, I was like, Helena, did you see my posting trot? And like that was like my big deal, you know. Like I posted trot, and I was surprised, like I was so happy. But I didn't have a goal, like I didn't know I was going to do that. It just like I found my horse moving forward, and I did it. You know? So Emily, I have a question for you in relation to that. Are you surprised that you are where you are now, or do you feel like destiny and that puts it in like
So the first time I went to Kentucky, well, Rolex, now Defender, Kentucky, the 5-star. Anyway, the first time I went as like a, I don't know, 10-year-old kid with my 4-H group, I said to myself, I'm going to ride here someday. And like, that was just kind of it. And it didn't, like, I didn't just get there. It took me over 20 years to get there, and a lot of different horses and trainers. So, but yeah, I always like knew that I would get to that level. Like, it just deep down, I kind of knew. And also I was willing to put in the work to get there. As far as badminton and Burley, that was actually never on my list until I did my first 5-star. And then I was like, why not? Let's do that. You know, so that was like an evolving goal. But yeah. So I'm a little surprised at all the things I've gotten to do, but also not.
Track, you know, I think at 25%, that's day in, day out success. But if you're But I remember one time looking, whatever it was that was the jumper, and I think it was Daniel Deusser, and I think he was one of 11. So you guys go, winning is at a much slower rate. How do you stay the course and not panic and start adjusting things for the sake of adjusting things? Well, nothing's broken, but you think maybe something it has to be broken.
Yeah. I think it's that last 1 or 2% that's the hardest to reach. Like at the 5-star level, we're all pretty good. Our horses are all pretty good. You're always trying to look for that edge to get that little bit better score or clearer jump round or whatever. So yeah, I don't really know the formula. So
I think the other thing with horses, and this is something I've struggled with, is knowing when not to change something, because it's that last 1 or 2% where you're like, God, maybe if I just try this new bit, it'll make all the difference in the world. And then you ride in that bit like 3 times and you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I should, and then you go back to the other bit and then you're like, maybe I try this thing. And it's like, maybe you just trust the process. And through trusting the process, you actually gain that 1 or 2% because you're not changing everything up on them so often.
Yeah, and I think that's what separates the guys who can win it, say, year in. They know that if they have a bad month, it's a bad month. It's not not because there's the ones who can not start. So just curious because guys win it's so hard, and the higher up and less and less you.
yeah. So I guess you just
I just think it must be hard.
It is hard, yeah. But I mean, if you really enjoy the process, then it's not quite as hard, I guess. Yeah, but I think just staying the course, if you've got a good thing, and like you were saying, you may have a bad show, but hopefully the next one will be better if you just stay the course.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I don't think I want to do this.
That's my mom, by the way. So
Mom questioned it. It was like, well, maybe you shouldn't.
well,
Because I don't want to see you go down the leaf pit either.
yeah. Yeah, walking the course was terrifying. Like, I was actually quite nervous. But then it's this weird thing. Like, I get on Barry, and it's cross-country day. I'm like, it's going to be fine. But up until then, yeah, I did question my life decisions. But it worked out.
Does Barry bring you some? Is there comfort with him because
Yeah.
you're so tight?
At least in the jumping phases. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Lots of comfort. So,
Yeah, it's like sometimes I get nervous and then I sit in the saddle and I'm like, oh, everything's going to be okay. And I wonder if that's the horse or if it's that's in us. Like we just feel better when we're in the saddle, when we're on our horses. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of young horses, and I definitely feel much more secure on the horses I've had for 2, 3, 4 years than I do getting on the young babies. Like, I have this running joke. I do not wear my air vest for my modified plus horses, but I'm wearing my air vest, beginner novice through training, because that's when it goes crazy. But yeah, I think it all comes down to we spend so much time building this relationship through repetition, and through those reps, it's not just the horse performing the reps. We're also putting in the reps, putting in the time. So it's probably more so the trust you have in your training with Barry, more so than, because I mean, Barry might go and jump the jumps by himself, but you put any random rider on him and he may not do what he's doing for you.
Have you put other people on?
if they can get on, he's he doesn't let really, like, he barely lets me get on him, so it's, you know, he's a quirky boy. So, yeah.
And did you have a?
Yeah, I had a couple. Growing up on pony. But so. Along. I had. He says, well, you. And it was. Horse has no idea. Those are all.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
personality. Days. Well, we finished, but we're. So,
Mm. Mhm.
and that's the. Is to do. Everyone.
Mhm.
And I didn't care. I go to clinics. That they're.
Mhm.
I didn't even know. He says you need one. So some of these things that we go on
Mhm.
our path. But I think the last few years.
Mhm.
Things like that.
Mhm. Yeah.
Distinction. Like this man.
Yeah, that's a great sentiment. I think with training horses, especially, a lot of the times up until a certain level, we almost view the competition as a checkpoint. And so then it's really hard to differentiate the competition from the training. And I think if we can kind of move the competition to say, move the conversation to say, okay, yeah, the competition may not have gone the way you wanted it to go, but it's still pushing you in the right direction, then you really haven't failed. And so that was kind of the point of this was how are we even viewing failure, or are we just learning and moving on? So yeah. And yes.
Background.
Mhm.
Solitaire tennis. Good champion. Back row. Crying and I gave up tennis. I picked up a lacrosse stick. High school. Over there.
Oh wow.
So I was playing on the best.
Hmm.
Now I struggled. Step back. I didn't know where the sport was going to take me. But kind of embraced it.
Hmm.
I probably should. Much about your sport, but active or fear and anxiety. Why?
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah, I almost think that with horse sports especially, k- there's almost this romanticize, like we almost romanticize the struggle, where we almost always expect it to be hard. And because of that, I think that's when we like for eventing, the fear and anxiety, I think for the competitors is way different, for the professionals is way different than the fear and anxiety of a junior or a young rider or a adult amateur, because they do so much. This is their probably their one thing that they spend all their money, their hours outside of work, and they want to go and they want to accomplish this thing, and then it either does or doesn't happen. With the professional, our reputation, our business, our, we put so much of ourselves into the training of the horse, and so much of what we make goes to paying for that we put so much expectation on ourselves that when it doesn't hurt or when it doesn't go as planned, it almost feels like the end of the world. But then you have 6 other horses you're competing, so you only have like 2 minutes to actually feel bad about it before you have to move on and go do, the next thing.
I can talk a little bit about the comparison between the two sports, because I was also an All-American D1 women's lacrosse player. And the difference is that when you're playing lacrosse or a team sport, especially at a really high level, it's a herd mentality. There is so much movement between your physicality and your teammates' physicality. The ball, it's almost like it's one mind. And I know you know how that feels. You can see where that ball is going to go 2 passes down. You can anticipate somebody coming through the circle. It's like a herd. It's a collective mindset. When you're sitting on a horse, even though the horse is your partner, it's a solitary thing, and I think our subconscious mind understands that, even though we're like, oh, my horse is my partner, you're alone up there. And your job is to figure out what this brain, this animal needs from every second that you're working with them. And so it's like unlike any other sport, because your equipment, for lack of a better word, has its own mind, its own feelings, its own opinions, its own balance, its own hunger, its own thirst, that we don't always understand. But so I think that's probably the biggest difference. And so how do you feel dignity when you're frustrated and you're struggling and you're confused? I think there are just far more layers to the stress and the fear and anxiety when you're sitting on a horse than there are when that stress and anxiety is distributed among the whole team. Excuse me. You've never taken a lacrosse. You've never taken a shot in the eye.
Whatever. Horseback riding is life and death experience all the time.
Yeah.
So when you're gonna ride something like Burley, or for me, just posting in my backyard over uneven terrain, I could fall off and break my arm or break my neck. Right? I mean, it's always there.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of this conversation limits and the exhilaration that certainly comes.
Yeah.
That's got to be a supercharged.
Do you get scared?
Oh yeah, I think a little bit of fear is healthy, and I know that we've like talked a lot about fear and anxiety, but I think it's probably important to just touch on like anyone that's a horse person here, you do it because you love the horse, and there's a lot of joy that comes with that, and then unfortunately there is that other side, the fear and anxiety, but trying to remember the joy and why you're doing it is kind of a way to combat the fear a bit.
It's the sweet spot. It's like when you hit the center of your racket or the middle of your golf club, when you and your horse are like, he's like, I got you. Okay, we're going. That's what we live for. And those are the when you dial it down, as Amy was saying, your realistic expectations, when you meet them, it's everything. It's what makes you get a little greedy and go for the next one. It's the joy. It's everything. It's the fabric of who we are, I think. We're weird. We're horse people. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the question, because
Yeah.
or even just to have.
So, I show jumped as a junior, and I had the opportunity to buy this really nice horse, and she was a dressage horse, but the dressage people are funny because if their horse jumps out of the paddock, they're like, it doesn't want to do dressage, it wants another job, I'm selling it. So I had this dressage rider call me, and she said, I have this horse, I think it wants to jump. So I said, okay. She's like, it trotted out of a 6-foot paddock fence. I go, I'm on my way. And this horse ended up really struggling in the show jumping. And one day I took her out and I just decided to do a gallop set. And there was this moment where we were riding and we were galloping up this hill, and it was like our breathing was in sync. And anytime the horses get hard or the sport gets heavy, because it can be hard and it can get heavy, I just remember like that feeling of oneness, and you don't get that with anything else. And why would I give all of the fear and anxiety and, you know, whatever up when I can have this moment of such solitude? It's almost like meditation, you know? And I think we all, if I asked you to close your eyes and picture the happiest you've ever been while on a horse, we all have this one thing that we always go back to. And it so clearly sticks out in my mind that that's why I do this.
I like the word you used, that feeling of oneness. Just hearing that word made me kind of breathe a little more deeply. But no, I don't think everybody has the same motivation to ride. I think they do, but they really don't.
Mhm. Try to find one good thing and then stop riding. I'm very, if things are going downhill or the whole ride has just not been enjoyable, I really have to take, it's so easy to get frustrated. I really have to take a moment and say, okay, what is this horse good at? And then I just do that thing, and hopefully they leave the ride on a more positive note, and then whatever it was, we try it again later. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week. But it's so much about not, we as people have bad days. We wake up on the wrong side of the bed, our coffee didn't taste good, our breakfast was, you know, whatever it is, we have bad days, and so do they. And I think just realizing that they are trying, and we need to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, just maybe not today. I don't know if you...
No, I agree with that. Find something positive. Try again later.
Yep.
You
I'm going to disagree.
know? Okay.
Because
There's one in
hear
every
it.
crowd.
I mostly agree, but I have a little disagreement. I think that when a really important question to ask yourself when your horse is struggling, when you're feeling, is why? Why might this be happening? And you could spend 6 weeks trying to answer that question, but I don't think enough people ask why. So I try to keep why in my back pocket at all times. If usually it's because my horse is confused, uncomfortable, I'm not clear enough in my aids, lack of clarity there. But I don't think that horses just have a bad day. I think there are days when they don't, they're not keen on doing whatever work you want. So that's where I agree with you. I think, and sometimes, you know, my mare will wake up like a middle-aged mom, and some days she's like a 21-year-old. So I definitely see that, but I also think that we can do a better job of asking ourselves why. What does this specific behavior mean? It could be a head toss, it could be tripping, it could be resisting, it could be rearing, whatever that is, but why? And then spend some time trying to figure out the answer to that. And then being willing to say, I'm not going to answer this today, or I need help answering this.
Yeah. Well, I think that is an excellent spot to wrap up our first ever Voices of Aiken. Thank you all so much for coming out. This has been so informative, so enjoyable. And yeah, thank you for having the conversation with us.
Thanks for hosting. It was-
Yeah.
It's really fun. Can we do more?
I think we should do more. So as we end, I just wanted to, definitely give shout outs again to Urban and Rural. Thank you so much for hosting this, along with Solo Vino for the delicious wine. It was incredible. And then I did also want to give a shout out. I know Emily likes this company as well, but I have gotten really into socks as of recent. And if anyone has any sock needs, check out JoJo Socks because they make such high quality. They're great for sweaty feet, which in South Carolina in the summer we all struggle with. So
Which comes with fear and anxiety.
yes, combat fear and anxiety with JoJo Socks. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.